Okay, we are live, everyone. We are at the top of the hour. Please feel free to say hello once you log in. Tell us where you're logging in from. This is my favorite part. I'm Jenna. I'm the nonprofit advocate for Donorbox, and we're joined by Toby Johnson today. Everybody give her a big hello. I am fangirling right now as a former volunteer manager, let me tell you.
Jenna, you're too much.
I've learned so much from you, Toby. If only you knew. So we've got some folks coming in from Great Bend, Kansas, England, Charleston, Chicago, Tucson, Colorado, Indiana, Orlando, New York, Germany. Wow, Tokyo. What time is it in Tokyo? Please let me know. Okay. Wow, we've got people from all over Italy. That sounds like a dream. Denmark. We've got a global crowd today, Toby. This is awesome.
Awesome.
Well, we have got a lot of content to go over today, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited you're here. My name is Jenna, and I am the nonprofit advocate for Donorbox, and I'll also be the moderator for this session today. For those of you who are not familiar with Donorbox, we provide nonprofits with simple and effective tools to manage their online fundraising activities and connect with individual donors on a deeper level. Today, I am proud to say that we have helped over 35,000 organizations across the globe raise more than $700 million. To learn more, you can visit us on our site at donorbox.org. And I am so excited today. We are joined by Toby Johnson to talk about how you can find your next 20 volunteer superstars with free tools and smarter strategy. This is so important. Now, Toby is an internationally sought after expert consultant, master trainer in volunteer engagement with a special focus in engaging audiences online, as she is doing today. She is known for her modern thought leadership, highly practical, evidence-based strategies, and innovative big hat thinking around engaging, supporting, and acknowledging the work of volunteers. She is also the president of Toby Johnson and Associates, a consulting firm whose mission is to help nonprofit organizations make connections with remarkable volunteers. In 2015, she also founded Volunteer Pro, an online training and virtual coaching community for leaders of volunteers. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. Through her signature learning program, she helps hundreds of volunteer-driven organizations build, grow, and scale their volunteer engagement each year. On top of all this, Toby is a co-host of the Time Plus Talent podcast with Jennifer Bennett of Volunteer Match and wrote chapter 1 of the book Volunteer Engagement 2.0. We are so excited to have you today, Toby. Now, before I pass the baton over to you, I just want to mention a couple of items, so bear with me for a second. Please note that Toby's presentation will be about 50 to 55 minutes long, and we will allot additional time at the end for Q&A. This webinar is being recorded. We've got you covered, and all registrants will receive a link for that recording, along with a free bonus bundle that we will drop the link for later. Please feel free to drop questions throughout the chat during the webinar, and we'll be behind the scenes marking those so we can answer as many as we can. And you'll also see several helpful links pop up throughout the webinar in your left-hand corner. You can click those and they'll open right up. Okay, without further ado, everyone, please give Toby a warm welcome. Again, we're so excited to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Jenna. So excited to be here. So let me, for some reason, I'm getting a little bit of back. There we go. So howdy, y'all. I see someone logging in from Nashville, Michigan. Well, I'm in East Tennessee, and I'm about 2.5 hours east of Nashville, Tennessee. So it was fun to see that. And thanks to everybody for joining in the chat. I love to see chats. If you have questions, post them, and they'll tag them and put them in the questions box. And as Jenna noted, I have for you a bonus bundle, and the bonus bundle includes both the slides, a PDF of the half-page slides, and this awesome workbook. So if you click on that handouts tab and you link and go over and get that, you can grab that now, or you can grab it later, and it'll help you implement what I'm training today. So I'm super excited, as I said, to be here and share with you all the goodness that is volunteer engagement. I've been working in the nonprofit field for about 30 years, and for about 10 of them, 10 to 12, I've been focusing specifically on helping nonprofits like yours grow and build their volunteer strategies. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you how to make the ultimate shift from confusion, worry, and struggle around getting responses online, specifically to volunteer calls to action, to quickly scaling your volunteer recruitment results by focusing on a few simple but essential strategies. Gang, times are changing. We need to get much better at communicating online. It's a really busy online and noisy online marketplace. And I'm sad to say that nonprofits really aren't raising to the top, particularly around their volunteer efforts. And so today I'm going to help you just move ahead by leaps and bounds. So I'm really excited about it. So here are 3 helpful tools that I'm going to cover today, things that I think will really help you get traction, and things that a lot of people don't think about very often. One is volunteer personas, how to hone in on your ideal volunteer. And, you know, a lot of times people just practice AWB, any warm body recruiting. And when you try to attract everyone, you end up diluting your messages and attracting no one. So I want you to really be able to attract just the right volunteers for your needs. And we're going to do that through a tool called Volunteer Personas. Next, I want to talk about Google search results. Now, in your handouts, there's a link to, and I will talk about later, a previous webinar that Donorbox did on how to get a Google grant. So you need to figure out if your agency already has a Google grant, and if not, you can go get one and then start really turbocharging your Google search results. Because you know what? Where do people find the information they need? The first place they look is on their phone, and most often on Google. And so you've got to show up in people's phones and on Google when they're looking for information. Those are top of mind people. If people are looking for volunteer opportunities, that's where they go first. So I want to teach you how to do that. And then the third thing I want to teach you is your landing pages or your web pages where you're describing the opportunities to your prospective volunteers. And again, this is an area where we have lots to improve, y'all. And so I'm going to give you some very specific steps to improving those. So it's action-packed. We've got tons to offer. And make sure you go to that bonus bundle and get the slides and the workbook, because you can use that workbook to translate what I'm teaching you right now into action steps and really take this learning forward. Because I don't teach just to teach. I want to make sure you're making improvements and getting results. So here's my first mindset shifter I want to point out. If you don't use technology to recruit volunteers, you'll find that volunteers don't use technology. Now, I will hear from leaders of volunteers around the world that their volunteers are resistant to using technology. And my first, of course, we want to help everyone come along. We want to help support and grow volunteers if they're not comfortable using tech. We want to help and train them and mentor them so that they can use tech. But you know, the fastest way to getting volunteers who use technology is to attract them using technology. You become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if folks find you via technology, they're not going to complain about using technology, right? Because they already know how to use it. So that's something I want you to keep in mind today. In today's world, as we evolve, and particularly, you know, some of you are still on lockdown, some of you are not fully operational yet, coming back from the pandemic, we have all learned that we need to grow our digital maturity. And so this is one way to do it with some of the strategies I'm teaching today. But I also want to talk about the number one mindset shift that you need to make when you're thinking about attracting and engaging volunteers. Is the work worth it? Is the work worth it? Is my question to you, because I'm going to share with you tactics that while the tools are free, the work is work. It takes time. It takes energy. It takes effort. I'm not offering any magic wand here. There's no such thing as a magic wand in volunteer engagement. Those of you who've been working in volunteer engagement know what I'm saying here. But I want you to understand a few things about volunteers. People have asked and are thinking that donations have gone down. Charitable donations to nonprofits have gone down. And the report from Q1 from a Fundraising Effectiveness Project, Q1 2021, which is January through March 2021, shows a 10% increase in overall donors. But not all nonprofits benefited from this increase in giving of individual donors. And, you know, the nonprofit sector is driven by individual donations. I mean, you know that. You use the Donorbox tool. You're collecting individual donations all the time. So, but not everybody was a winner. And you can see human services and animal groups were winners, and arts and culture and education did not do so well in Q1. But here's the thing. I think it has everything to do with whether or not you're engaging volunteers. And for some of our arts and culture organizations in museums, etc., they had to shut down. They couldn't engage their volunteers. But I want to show you something, some very interesting data. Check this out. After attending an event or after volunteering, when are people most likely to donate? Look, you can spend all of your time and energy and resources on putting on those absolutely fabulous fun runs and galas, and you can think about volunteer engagement. Volunteer engagement is as powerful. This is a donor loyalty study from ABILA about what engages, how people are engaged and when they feel like they want to donate. It's really interesting. How do donors feel most engaged? Well, guess what? Again, people feel most engaged when they're making a contribution, either when they are pulling out their wallet to pull out their credit card or write a check, or they're contributing volunteer time. Now, we spend a lot of time and energy on our social media strategies and our social functions and our networking events and our thank you notes and our appreciation and all of that around our donors. But look, volunteer time can be more impactful. A meaningful volunteer experience can be more impactful than all of your other fundraising activities. It's where people feel most engaged with your nonprofit. And if you know anything about donor cultivation, it's all about that feeling of connection, isn't it? And when people are volunteering, they feel most connected. So this is a study from another study from ABILA. Now, we also know that volunteers are donors. So the next question is, well, are volunteers donors? Yes, they are. In fact, 87% of people who volunteer also make contributions. And a small percentage of super donors, 4%, volunteer at all of the organizations they support financially. But 87% overlap. They donate and they make financial contributions. So donors are volunteers and volunteers are donors. So what I want you to think about when you're thinking about your volunteer engagement, think of it as a supporter ecosystem. Donors are becoming volunteers, volunteers are becoming donors, and it is a ecosystem of people going back and forth. Think about the stimulus checks that went out. For many of us, or some of us, not many of us, but some of us, we felt like, you know what, we didn't need all of that extra money. We wanted to give it away. So some of us decided to give it away. In our household, we decided to donate to an organization we had never contributed to. For some of us lost our jobs and we weren't able to make financial contributions. So what did we do instead? We became volunteers and contributed our time. So not only is there an ecosystem, but people are switching roles all the time based on their life circumstances. So when we think about your supporters, I want you to start thinking about it as an ecosystem rather than fundraising over here and volunteer coordination over here. It's just not the way it is. Now, I also want you to think about the economic impact of volunteers on your organization. Because again, is this work worth it? Does it make sense to do all of this work to find and engage volunteers? And, I want you to find your next 20 volunteers. I also want you to know what the economic impact could be of those next 20 volunteers that you're going to go out and attract, right? So let's run the numbers for you. Let's say you had 20 volunteers contributing 4 hours a week for the entire year of 52 weeks. That would be a total of 4,160 hours of additional staff time to fuel your nonprofit's goals. Second, we know from the independent sector that the average equivalent of a volunteer hour in the US anyway is $28.54. That's our national average. So that is an equivalent of $118,000 and $1,018 dollars and seven. I can't even say the amount. $118,726. Yes, it's a big number. I'm having a hard time saying it. So US. So in your country, you may have a different number. In the independent sector, you can go on their website. You can actually find, if you're in the US, you can find the number for your state. But gang, neither here nor there, it is a significant economic impact on and resource for your nonprofit. Now, let's take it a little bit further. If you had 4,160 volunteer hours, and we consider an FTE, full-time equivalent staffer, at 2,080 hours, that 20 volunteers can be equivalent to half of a full-time equivalent employee. So think about how much traction you get with, and some of you are all volunteer driven, and I get that, but some of you have paid staff. Think about what an additional half of an FTE. Now, if you had 40 volunteers, you're adding a full FTE. Now, again, working 4 hours a week the full year, right? So let's talk about return on investment. So that's just a little bit about the economic impact. I also want to talk about return on investment. Now, we know from research that 79% of volunteers donate, most often to the places where they volunteer. So if we had 20 total volunteers, we'd have 16 additional active donors if we recruited 20 more volunteers. Now, the average annual contribution through Donorbox, I asked my friends at Donorbox to give me their numbers, and they said our average is $204 per year. That means with those 16 active donors who are volunteers as well, you would bring in an additional $3,264 in an annual financial contributions. Now, if you had 40 volunteers, you'd have almost $7,000. So you can see how not only are we seeing the economic impact, we're seeing the actual financial contribution. Now, of course, you have to ask, you have to make the ask, but volunteers are willing. They are willing and able to help. Plus, we have priceless community capital. And I don't want to move on without mentioning this. There are so many things besides the numbers that volunteers bring to the table. Diverse lived experiences, connections to communities that you may not be connected with, advocacy on your behalf as a voter, as a citizen, skills, specialized skills they bring to the table. You name it, they have things to offer to you. So it makes absolute sense, in my mind, to do the work to really engage volunteers in a robust way in your nonprofit. So robust community engagement is the key to your nonprofit sustainability. This is the number one mindset shift I want you to make. If you're thinking that volunteers are a nice to have but not a need to have, I completely disagree. I believe they are the key to your nonprofit sustainability, specifically in difficult times, right? Like the times we're in right now. They are the key. And so not engaging the community, you run the risk of not being relevant. And you need those volunteers to help you engage. So here's where we're going to go with this webinar today. I've given you a really good kickoff update about where we're at. Let's talk about where we're going to go. I've just talked about making that number one mindset shift. I want to talk about finding your ideal volunteers, how to write those Google recruitment ads specifically, how to convert visitors to volunteers on your landing page, how you can work with me this fall. If you like what I'm talking about, there's actually an opportunity for you to learn more from me. So I'm going to give you a little bit of info on that. And we're going to have a live Q&A. So that's where we're headed. I don't know if you're like me, but I like to know where I'm headed in a webinar situation. So let's kick off with your volunteer persona, or let's continue with your volunteer persona. Now, here's the deal. Most of the volunteers that find your organization approach the organization themselves. This is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, the data might be a little bit different in different countries, but for the most part, nearly half of your volunteers approached you. They weren't asked by you. They found you through a search online. And so we want to think about who those people are and to make sure that those people who are a good fit with your nonprofit are attracted to you, that you become a magnet, that you are saying the words and being in the places where those folks are. So I want to help you become a mind reader so that your messaging to those volunteers is top notch and that it is really resonating with them. I also want to make sure you're attracting the exact kinds of people that you need to meet your mission, not the people that can't really help. So I want you to hone in, because you waste a lot of time if you're attracting and screening a lot of people who aren't the right fit. So you want to hone your messaging in. And you can do this through a volunteer persona. And some people call these avatars or ideal customer avatars or marketing personas. I just call them volunteer personas. They help you design volunteer opportunities. When you do the work to think through your persona, they help you design opportunities that really appeal to your ideal volunteer. They help you write content that would attract that ideal volunteer. They help you create tools and downloads. If you're doing any list building or cultivation of an audience, they can help you create tools that are appealing to that audience. They can help you figure out where to post your calls to action, where those folks hang out, particularly online. And they can help you time your asks, to time them for the best results when that particular volunteer is ready to hear from you. For example, students may be looking for a summer internship. So in the springtime is the best time to reach out to students. Or maybe they're looking for a fall, something to do during their fall semester, that the end of the summer is the best time to reach out. Middle of the summer, not the best time to reach out to students, right? So you're timing your asks. You're not just always just broadcasting, we need volunteers. You're being more strategic. Now, when we think about personas, I also like to think about obvious choices, to start with low-hanging fruit when we choose the kinds of personas we're going to develop. And I always recommend people develop 1 to 3. Start with one and see how it works out. But I'm going to ask you to post in the chat. You tell me who might be an obvious choice to become a museum docent. Who would be specifically interested in helping tour people around an art museum, for example? History buffs, seniors, artists. Yeah, Michelle, Aaron, Andrew. Yeah. So lots of art lovers. Exactly. Art. What about art history graduate students? I used to be one. I have a master's in art history. Not very many people know that. Okay, what about a watershed advocate? Who would be an obvious choice? Who would be an obvious person who would be interested in watershed advocacy? So just post in the chat. Hikers, yes, Kristen, absolutely. College and grad students, Beth says. I think you're saying that around the watershed advocate. Fisher folk, Craig, I love it. Environmental studies folks, Sarah says, yes, absolutely. So what about organic home gardeners? That's thinking out the box. I'm in my volunteer gig, I'm a Knox County master gardener. That's what I do in my volunteering. So I'm an organic home gardener. So I care about our watersheds and I want to keep them clean because it keeps my garden clean too. Okay, what about hospice support? Who do you think would be And someone who might be interested in offering hospice support. Survivors and caregivers, Candace says. Yeah, Carolyn says retired nurses. Brittany says religious folks. Absolutely. Family members of past patients. In fact, my aunt volunteers and has volunteered for the past 15 years at the hospice where my grandmother passed away. And she's performed all kinds of roles there. She's a long-term volunteer there. And that's the way she honors my grandmother. And my grandmother was really cool. My grandmother did a lot of service in her life as well. So my aunt is following in her footsteps, and it makes her feel close to her mom. Okay, what about healthcare navigator? What if somebody's trying to help someone navigate their healthcare benefits? Public health students, Michael says. Cancer survivors, Paul says. Yeah, absolutely, you guys. So what about retired insurance agents? If they're helping people choose, for example, not everywhere, but in the US, we have a lot of options when it comes to healthcare coverage, and not all of them are equal, and not all of them are affordable. And so we need people to help navigate. And so retired insurance agents might be a good choice. So retired doctors, patient advocates. So great. So you see what I'm saying? When you're choosing to build a persona, think about who is an obvious choice for you, okay? So when you're building out a persona, this is basically, and this is all in your workbook. So you can see all of this in your workbook. You're figuring out their name, what's their job title, if they're in student, what's their education, what's their demographics, what are their goals and motivations? What do they want to achieve? How do you help them achieve their goals? Why does volunteering make sense in their world? And you want to figure out how they would describe themselves, what they have strong opinions about. Now, a persona is not a stereotype of a person. You're actually imagining an archetype that represents that person. So you're getting into detail. You're not broad brush stroking and trying to paint everybody with these generalized terms. You're actually imagining a real person who represents that group of people. What would they be like? So you want to imagine this in a lot of detail. You also want to think about their values and interests. What are they committed to? What do they believe? How do you align with their beliefs? What are their hobbies? What stops them from serving? Who do they trust? What are the keywords they use? Now, this is important when we talk about part 2, where we talk about doing Google searches. And then when are they most likely to be open to an ask? So these are all the things you want to think through as you build out this persona. So you want to think about this in detail. Consider, I like to choose a stock photo of somebody and imagine their life completely. And then I want to focus all of my marketing messaging to that imaginary person. Now, people always worry, like, okay, am I going to cut out everybody else? No, you're not, but you're going to be much more effective and efficient at attracting those people who are like your persona, those ideal volunteers who are like your persona. So let's look at an example of a persona. So here's Alicia. So let's say that my persona is single moms. I want to attract single moms to my volunteer opportunities. She's female. She works at a local arts organization. She uses Instagram all the time. Her son is recovering from cancer. She has a little boy. You can see him there. She meets with his support group on a regular basis, and she's active at her son's school. So what do you think, just post in the chat, what do you think motivates Alicia to volunteer, and where can she likely be found? Just post in her son. Yeah. Yep. A cause. Yeah. So, and she can be found at her son's school. Yep. Health condition, her son's healing, wellness. Absolutely wants to give back. Absolutely. So you're starting to see how you're imagining everything about Alicia. Now, Alicia's, her quote is, since my son's cancer diagnosis and recovery, I want to give back and help other parents thrive, even when it's hard. So some of you already in the chat talked about this, right? You were already mentioning this, wanting to give back. But she has a particular focus. She wants, even when it's hard, she wants other parents to be able to survive and thrive, right? That's her primary motivation. So you think about how this can really add depth to your volunteer recruitment messaging. And then what are her values and beliefs? What might be barriers to her volunteering? post in the chat what you think might be barriers to Alicia being able to volunteer. Time, absolutely. Everybody's posting time in her job. And so when you think about advertising and reaching out to Alicia, you want to make sure you have messaging around flexibility of time. And for as little as X hours per month, you can give us a hand. And we have flexible opportunities at different times of the day. Or so you're thinking, or we do family volunteering where you can bring your son along. So you can see how this works, where you're really focusing in because you know what her barriers are. So you're anticipating those objections to service and answering them proactively before they even come up. Great. So that's the way to really build a persona. It really helps to build a persona so that you can focus your messaging, your timing of your asks, and also to find other gatekeepers and people in the community who might connect with people like Alicia, so that you know where you can do your outreach. Now, this also helps you with your Google search results. I'm going to talk about how to build your Google search results. Now, the truth is that if people can't find you online, they can't engage with you. If they don't see you coming up in Google, in fact, on page 1 of Google search results, or the SERP, SERP is what the cool kids call it, the SERP, search engine results page, which is your page 1 of Google. If people don't see you there, they can't engage with you because they simply don't know you exist. And it's the tyranny of the algorithm. It really is that, you know what, if you don't show up on page 1, you just don't exist in people's minds. So I want to get you to page 1 on Google. Get your volunteer opportunities there, not just your organization, but your volunteer opportunities as well. So let's talk about how to do that. So watch that Donorbox webinar replay. The link is in your handouts tab as well. But Donorbox did in last month increase your online donation by using Google Ad Grants. So the great thing about it is you can do advertising on Google, which will help you get to page 1. And in fact, when you pay for advertising or you get a grant, you will automatically be on page 1 of Google. So that's one way to get on page 1 of Google. So watch that webinar and start your ads process. Now, Google Ads at work, they have worked for people. Look at Samaritans. There's a case study that Google shared where they had 1,768 volunteer signups through their Google Ads. So Google Ads are not only for financial contributions. And remember, volunteers are donors. So it's a double win when you are able to engage volunteers. So they also were able to raise a fair amount of money as well. So Google Ads really work, but they're not just for financial contributions. So I want to make that clear. So let me ask you though, there's also, in addition to the ads, there's also our organic search results. So wouldn't it be great if you showed up both as an ad and in the organic search results on page 1 of Google? Now, if you showed up on page 1 both as an ad and as an organic, you're getting double duty there. You're getting 2 places to connect with people, and your credibility is going up by leaps and bounds. So the problem is when we put together our web pages, we don't think very clearly about what they should say. Oftentimes we just kind of put random stuff in there, or we let Google scrape off of our page what it wants to show. I want you to be more purposeful in this. First of all, I want you to get on page 1, but the way to get on page 1 is to get clicks. And so first, you've got to make sure that your SERP results or your search results look enticing. So I want you to tell me, which is the most click-worthy? Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? So with pause, here's volunteer pause. Sign up, send me pause news and updates. Now, for volunteering, which do you think is more click-worthy? Number 2, most popular animals and nonprofits and charities from great nonprofits. And then you can see we sort of have a story going on in there. 3, volunteer lucky dog animal rescue, up sort of a cutoff sentence. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or if you're a volunteer looking for a volunteer opportunity, which would you be more interested in 2019, Young Williams Animal Center volunteers, tributes, walkway of life, animal compassion fund. So it's not really telling us much, isn't it? Is it? So a lot of people are putting one. So, you know, I want you to think about this and see what your volunteer page comes up in Google and what it says about your organization. None of these, in my mind, make a compelling case. For me, the answer is none. Which are click-worthy? For me, none of these would be of interest to me too much, right? These are tough. They're not giving me all of the information. I want to volunteer. I don't want to follow you on Instagram. Maybe, I don't want to hear about your animal compassion fund. I'm looking for volunteering opportunities. So I want you to think about making a better ad and have it show up better on the search engine results as well. So when you're creating an ad, I want you to think about creating one campaign. So when you're creating one campaign, you can focus, when you're using your Google Ads grant, you can focus your ad groups on volunteer roles and then create 3 ads per group with one big idea, right? Make it about them. If you think about the barriers or the needs or the motivations for your volunteer persona, you want to make sure that you include that in your ads, right? And you want to use what works. So in your workbook, I have space for you to work this out, but use all of your space, all your character counts, your extensions, your keywords. You want to create your URL, your web link that it makes sense. You want to, sometimes if you put numbers in your title, it's more likely to be clicked. Using strong calls to action, going local, and making sure it looks good on mobile. So these are just some tips for better ads. Inside your workbook, there's more, and there's a space to work out how to work out your ads. So you want to think about addressing also in your ads, what is the problem that people are trying to solve with their Google ads? So when their Google search, I mean. So when people are on Google, they pull out their phone, they go on Google, and they're looking specifically for a volunteer opportunity. But there's something else. There's another problem they're trying to solve. So I want to show you what those problems are. And you're thinking, what? Volunteers don't have problems. Yes, no one takes action in life except to solve a quote unquote problem. And you're thinking, what is she talking about? I'm telling you, a motivation is the same thing as a problem that needs to be solved. And I want to show you what motivates or what are the problems that volunteers are trying to solve through volunteering, so that you can include these in your ads. And of course, you want to think through what are the primary motivations for your particular persona. Because remember, we're not trying to attract everyone. We're only trying to attract your ideal volunteer through your ads. So you also want to test your ads. The other thing about online advertising, the truth of with a capital T, is that it never is perfect from the get-go. You got to review things and update things. So whether it's you or your marketing and communications folks, you got to work together to test and continue to update. So let's talk about solving volunteer problems. So there are 6 motivations that research shows. This research has been done over and over again. It's been validated around the world in different contexts, with different languages, with volunteers from different backgrounds. And these 6 always boil up to the top. First is values, a way to express people's humanitarian and altruistic values. So if you, if you think about the problem that folks are trying to solve, it's that I want to live up to my values and I want to help others who are less fortunate. Now, people sometimes use that terminology. You may not like that terminology, but it is a common terminology. I want to help others. So I want to live up to my values. That's the problem, that I don't have an opportunity yet, or currently to live up to my values. If I volunteer, I will be able to live up to my values. See how that works as a problem? Career. Career is a way to improve career prospects. Now, student volunteers, this is one of their primary volunteering motivations. So I wish to improve my resume and increase my professional contacts. I want to network. A lot of people volunteer because they want to see what working in a nonprofit is like. So that's a career motivation. And that's the problem they're trying to solve. Hey, I want to add things to my resume. By volunteering, I can solve the problem of not having enough stuff on my resume. Social, a way to develop and strengthen social ties. So the problem that's being solved is I want to be a positive role model. I want to volunteer with my friends. Maybe, hey, I need more social time, even if it's volunteering online. And so volunteering can help me spend time with my friends, spend quality time with my friends. Now, understanding, a way to gain knowledge, skills, and abilities. In my Master Gardener group, we love volunteering together because we're always sharing gardening tips with one another. In fact, my volunteering is doing a Facebook Live every Saturday morning where we answer gardening tips. We talk about what's happening in our gardens. It's a lot of fun, and we completely geek out about it. Lots of fun. So the problem is I wish to learn more about the causes I believe in, or I want to build skills in this arena, in this area. Sometimes people are volunteering because they want to learn more about your cause in general. That's completely legitimate, and volunteering can help them do that. Enhancement, a way to help the ego grow. This is usually enhancement motivation is about becoming a leader. For example, most of your board members probably have an enhancement motivation to volunteer. And board members are volunteers, by the way. And so all of this applies to your board members as well. Everything I'm teaching today applies to your board members as well. So the problem I'm trying to solve is I wish to feel proud of my work, or I want to expand my social network, or I want to have more influence in the world. All of these are legitimate for those folks who have that motivation. And then finally, protective motives. This is an interesting motivation. My aunt had a protective motive when she initially started volunteering for hospice, because my grandmother had just passed away there, and she started volunteering with the grief group there. And it was a way for her. She felt pretty fragile and she wanted to heal. So the problem she was solving is immersing herself a bit to heal, right? And maybe in some cases it's to forget about my troubles. I have heard of volunteers and known volunteers who volunteered after their spouse has passed away because they needed to get back out into the community and they needed to stop staying at home. And their kids were like, look, Dad, you got to get out of the house, right? I know a volunteer who was an annual volunteer of the year. He was an amazing person. And he didn't start out that way. He started out being depressed and being at home because his spouse had passed away. And his son said, please go down the block to the local senior center and start volunteering. I think it will help you. And the rest was history with that volunteer. So when you think about writing copy, and you can pinpoint the motivations of your team by going to this generosity research website. And again, if you download the bonus bundle, you'll see this link in those slides, in half-page slides. So one big idea when you're writing copy for your ads, or whether it's a Google ad or it's a volunteer posting, think about this formula. Any ideal volunteer, so your volunteer persona, can solve their problem, whatever their primary motivation is, by volunteering for your cause because, and then you talk about how it solves their problem, right? Now you can include this in the body copy of your search results, and it would make your search results in Google like so much better. People would want to click on that, right? So for example, anyone who cares about our neighborhood health can keep it clean and green by volunteering for Westtown Greenway, because we will show you how to educate kids on easy ways to reduce pollution. So you see how this works. It's very simple, but powerful. Simple, but powerful. You don't see anything about volunteer now, shifts are open, we desperately need volunteers. None of that. We are speaking in a volunteer-centric way. We are meeting their needs, right? And the headline might be, care about our neighborhood, volunteer to help kids cut pollution, right? So this is just one example. You can see how it might work for your nonprofit. So when you're thinking about your Google ad, and your text-based ad copy, think about these specific constraints. Because one of the things you want to do is make sure that you're not putting too much text so it cuts off and it gets the ... When you go online and you see that, isn't it frustrating when you can't read the whole thing? So also, when you're doing ads, make sure you use all of the ad extensions possible. They will offer you about 9 different ways to add on to your ad. So absolutely don't ignore that. There's a little bit more in here. So just make sure that you're using everything. The key takeaway here is make sure you're using all of your real estate, but not more of your real estate. Use the space allotted, but not one character more. So it all comes out on your ad. It's a complete thing. Human beings like to see complete things, and then they'll be more likely to click on it. And if it includes solving your ideal volunteer's problem, they're going to be more likely to click on it. So it might be the ad to your main volunteering page. You could also run an ad to a specific volunteer opportunity that you are currently recruiting for or having a hard time filling. So you can get that specific. But the one takeaway when you think about posting your ads, whether they be Google ad or your organic search results, or posting on your website or on an intermediary website like Volunteer Match or your local volunteer center, is you've got to make a compelling case. You've got to speak to the volunteers' needs and motivations. And you've got to understand this one thing about volunteers, and I'm going to share it with you. People don't volunteer because they enjoy working for free. Nobody's out there saying, hey, you know what I want to do this weekend? I want to work for free. Doesn't working for free sound fun? I should work for free. That's not what people are saying. People are saying they want to change the world. Hey, I want to volunteer. I want to give my time because I want to see this thing happen. So you've got to focus on transformation, okay? So here's an example of a recruitment ad, and I've taken into account all the things I've recommended to you so far. So 250 plus volunteers can't be wrong. That's a lot of social proof right there. The Pet Patter Rescues, that's the name of the organization. If you just put a line there in your copy, just put that straight line, you can put your organization's name. And you can see in the URL, I put the actual volunteer role, dog walkers, because that's what people understand. And then I put in the ad, calling all retired dog lovers, kick off your next chapter with passion and purpose. Now, who am I reaching out to? Retirees. As a volunteer dog walker, stay fit, make new friends, bring joy to a puppy's life. So you see, I'm speaking to solving their problems, right? As they wait to find new homes. 250 plus volunteers, 80 plus 5-star reviews. I'm telling them that volunteers love working here. Get started in less than a week. We're also removing an objection, which is I reach out to organizations and they never get back to me. And believe me, just secret shop your volunteer opportunities. Sometimes call in, have a friend call in and ask about and see what happens. It's amazing how many people reach out and don't even get a response. Gang, you're shooting yourself in the foot right there. You don't want to do that. You want to be responsive. So if you're going to put ads up, make sure that there are people trained to check your applications online, to answer the phone, etc. So free training starts September 4th. Save your spot now, and then you can click to link more. So this is a sample ad that is much more compelling, I would argue, than the ones that I showed you that I found on the internet a while ago, right? It's just much more interesting. And Google keeps evolving, and their ad extensions and all the different things they do, there's different ways that they're helping you reach people. And so by all means, get out there and recruit volunteers using your Google ads. It's absolutely a great way to and if you're not using the ads, at least make sure that the headline and the meta description or snippet or the body copy you see here is on the web page that you've created for that, and talk to your web designer and just make sure that this stuff is entered on that web page and the Google bots will pick it up and put it on those organic search results. But if you don't enter this information in, you don't think it through, then Google just scrapes what it finds and you don't come out looking that well. So think it through, y'all. So also, you can get more ideas. SEMrush, which is an SEO company, they have a paid offering, but you can use their ad copies report for free and start to see what other people are doing with their volunteer recruitment ads. Some of your competitors, maybe. It's a great place to look around. Okay, last thing I want to quickly run through is your landing page, and then we'll do some Q&A, okay? So what's a landing page? It's basically a web page that's optimized for conversions. In this case, it's a web page that's optimized for volunteer conversions. So we started with your figuring out your ideal volunteer persona. Then we talked about reaching them on the first page of Google search, either via an ad or an organic search result. And now once they click on it, that search result, where does your ideal volunteer end up? They end up on a landing page on your website. And so we want to make sure that everything is consistent across all of your volunteer materials, that they have a same look and feel, that the messages are used. When things are not consistent, people stop clicking because they're like, wait, did I get lost? Where did I go? So make sure everything has the same look and feel, that has the same messages, that when you do that from your social media to your landing page, to your organic search results, to your application form, to everything else, it really needs to look consistent. Really needs to look consistent. There's different elements you want to include in your landing page. This is a basic, and again, this will be in your bonus bundle, and you can see this in your workbook and also in the slides. But you basically have the full recipe for creating a landing page that really stands out. That really stands out. So follow this to the T and you will start getting more clicks. The other thing I would add that I don't have listed here is make sure you have some photos of smiling people. Not a photo of 25 people in a group. 2 or 3 smiling people looking at the camera. Not stock photos, real volunteers. People have to get an emotional, or people need to get an emotional reaction when they visit a landing page, so it can't be all text. They need to see something. So we call it putting a hero image at the top. It could be a video, it can be a photo. So include a hero image at the top as well. That's something I didn't include in this recipe for success. All right, let's talk about calls to action. Calls to action are the buttons or the links that you are asking people to click on. Now, in Donorbox, you have a donate here call to action, right? In volunteering, you have a volunteer now or start your application today. So it answers 3 questions. What do you want them to do? What's in it for them? What might make them anxious about doing it? So solving an anxiety, and why does it matter? And you're like, wait a minute, a button can do all of that? Well, not the button by itself. The button plus some text around it. And I'm going to show you an example from real life of a corporate company who does this super well with very few words. Here it is, Netflix. Okay, what do you want them to do? Netflix wants you to join free for a month. That's what the button says. What's in it for them? They get to see what's next. They get to see emerging movies, right? Or shows on TV that their friends are talking about, not or TV or on Netflix, it should be, not TV. What's making people anxious about clicking that button? They wonder if they can cancel. So the text says cancel anytime. Why does it matter? Well, you can watch Netflix anywhere. You don't have to be from at home. You can watch it on your phone. So this is a super powerful call to action in very few words and very little design. So you think that the call to action for volunteering needs to be super complicated. It doesn't. Simpler is better. But see if you can answer all these things in your all these questions in your button, as well as some surrounding text on your volunteer landing page. Okay. One other quick thing I want to piece of advice I want to add is avoid desperate pleas for help. They only cast doubts about whether or not your organization is worthy of support. If you start telling people you don't have enough volunteers and you are desperate, they're going to wonder why. So do not take that route. So in my slides, I also show a great case study of Crisis Text Line. You can go to crisistextline.org to see their volunteer landing page. If you just go under on their top menu, you can click on volunteer. I think they do a really good job. The only thing I would add is a hero image of real people. But they include instead testimonials. They include testimonials of volunteers, and they talk about time and commitment. And the interesting thing about the Crisis Text Line volunteer landing page, and this is only a part of it, is that they actually focus on a specific kind of person. Our greatest need for crisis counselors is between 7 p.m. and 3 a.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Eastern. And so their ideal customer or their volunteer persona are people who are up at nighttime. And their entire landing page is focused on that ideal persona because that is the volunteer they're looking for right now. Now, nothing's set in stone, gang. You can always update these things as you fill up your roles. But I love that they are being very specific about the kind of volunteer they need. They're also really, really clear about the process. Step 1, step 2, step 3, get started. So their call to action is very simple, direct, and to the point. Yep. So really helpful. Do not put all this like scroll, 50 million things people have to do to join. It's too much. You're asking too much of someone who doesn't know you yet, right? So a couple other quick things before we start answering questions. Just make sure you include some on-page trust elements as well in your landing page. This will beef up the credibility of your whether it's reviews, ratings, etc. That's what you can do to make it even better. Now I want to move to Q&A. So if you have questions, post them in the chat right now. And while you're doing that, just want to take a pause and push to reset the world, because you know what? We're about soon, hopefully, to reopen fully. Now, some of you may be reopened and never closed down. Many of you have been kind of waiting. Now, times are changing quickly. Things are evolving. So you need to be prepared to start to attract and build a volunteer program that your volunteers will love and that will help you sustain into the future. And so I told you I'd talk quickly about where you can get help and work with me. We have a volunteer management fundamentals certificate course that is starting on September 13th. So if you're interested, the link is in your handouts link. You just go to volpro.net/begin. And here's what we're going to cover. It's a 5-week on-demand course, and I'll be doing 5 weekly Q&A calls with the group. And so you get to ask me questions about your nonprofit face-to-face, in person, and I'll answer them. And it's a on-demand online platform where you have lifetime access to the course and all the updates. So it's pretty awesome. You work at your own pace, but then you meet with me live every week. So it's pretty fun. Some of the things you'll put into action, you can see those in the slide deck and read about them later. But we are really helping nonprofits build a volunteer strategy that gets traction. That's my ultimate goal. Cool. So, gang, final before we start doing Q&A, instead of worrying about what you cannot control, like a pandemic, shift your energy to what you can create. I love this quote. Shift your energy to what you can create. Volunteers are out there right now. They want to help you, but you have got to have a strategy and a system that's smarter, that reaches them where they're at. And that in particular speaks directly to your ideal volunteer. And when you do that, you're going to become a magnet for volunteers. All right. So, Jenna, I ran a little bit long. So, gang, I'm going to answer questions for a little while. If you've got to run, I get it. Jenna will put up the recording later, and you can visit us and listen to the Q&A. But if you can stick around a few minutes, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Beautiful.
So, Jenna,
yes,
what do we have?
Toby, that was amazing.
Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, wait, hang on.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Now I
Excellent.
can.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for your insights. I love how you started off by reminding people that volunteers are donors. I mean, yes, they're giving their time, they're donating their time, but they also donate money. There's such a relationship there, and to shift our mindsets in that way is so, so important. Thank you for that. Okay. Thank you all for sticking around. Before we jump into Q&A, I just have a couple of quick announcements. Remember, make sure you get your free webinar bonus bundle. I am launching that link again. You can sign up for that and it will be in your inbox. Check your spam folder just in case you're not seeing it there as well. And we will be sending it in our post-event emailer. You will not miss it, I promise. We'll also be sending you the recording. Now, also, if we don't get to your question today, do not fret. We have launched a platform called the Donorbox Knowledge Community. And this is an amazing place where nonprofit professionals can connect with like-minded individuals and get focused answers to their questions regarding board management, volunteer engagement, marketing, web development, and so much more. So we have launched the link here. Please click join. This is an incredible community, and you can ask any of your questions here and our group of community managers. And we can maybe even loop Toby in as well to answer some of those questions. Okay, but on to the questions that we have already. Let's see. I love this question from Danielle. Now, with this concept in mind, how do you get past volunteers back active again? Is there another way that you can use online tools and special messaging to get them to reactivate?
Yes, yes. So there's a little bit of what I've taught you today. So it might be helpful to think about who were your best, most supportive volunteers in the past and create a volunteer persona around them so that it will help you develop the messaging that will appeal to them. Now, if folks are passionate supporters, they're just waiting for a time for you to call out to them. And you've got to have your ducks in a row. You've got to think about what their objections might be as well. So if you think about, so you can take the frameworks I've shown today and tweak them just a little bit. So I would still use the persona framework, but I would focus it on your existing or recently past volunteers and the ones that were the highest contributors to your results, and develop a persona around them. And that will help you with their messaging. You also want to think about what is it that is concerning them or is a barrier for them coming back to work for you. And so when you think about that, you want to think about, is it safety? Is it flexibility? Is it have your requirements changed? And so you want to think about all of those specific objections, and you want to address them when you ask people to come back. The third thing is you've got to have meaningful work for people to do. So you've got to design. In our Volunteer Management Fundamentals certificate course, we have a whole section on how to design meaningful roles, how to align the roles with your current needs and goals and aims as a nonprofit. So you want to make sure that you have meaningful work, but that meaningful work needs to be meaningful to the volunteer as well as you. And then the fourth thing is you need to use your digital tools effectively. One way I suggest is to create what's called a drip campaign or an automated email campaign, where it sends out a series of emails where you are sharing all of this information with your volunteers and then asking them to take action. And you can set up that drip email commit. Again, in the Volunteer Management Fundamental Certificate course, we talk about how to create these and the different types of campaigns you might create. But for a welcome back campaign, I think it's a perfect use of that type of tool. So Jenna, that's what I recommend.
That was a very wholesome answer. Thank you for that. I think you captured a lot of points there. Are you ready for our next? Okay,
sure.
This is from Tasha. We are a small organization, only 3 staff with huge programs and regularly feel stretched thin. Any recommendations for maximizing reaching out to volunteers when you don't have a massive capacity?
Yes, you've got to take a little time to build a volunteer leadership team that can help you with your recruitment. So you don't have to do all of the recruitment. For example, you could have a marketing intern create a persona and write some copy for you, for example. You could have a summer intern do that. You could have a welcome team, a volunteer welcome team that processes the applications, that conducts the interviews. You could have a part of your volunteer welcome team do your volunteer orientation training. You could go on catchafire.org and find a human resources professional to create a volunteer handbook for you. So, you don't have to do it perfectly, but you need to get started. And there is a point where you need to set aside some of your current tasks to invest in bringing on more volunteers in leadership roles. And you've got to prepare them and get them involved. But you have to, it's not just about working harder, it's about working smarter. And so sometimes the smartest thing you can do is to push the pause button on a project and invest time in building your volunteer capacity. Now, I don't recommend actually recruiting year round. And again, in our course, we talk about doing volunteer recruitment in seasons throughout the year. So you're not doing it 365 days a year. And that also helps you save time and focus on recruiting and then focus on supporting. So I think you're going to need to bring in volunteer teams, but you're going to need to figure out a way to build that capacity. And you only have so many hours in the day, so you've got to figure out priorities. And volunteer engagement often falls to the bottom of the to-do list. I get it, but you will not scale without volunteers if you don't have the funding to pay for staff. You just can't scale. It's the physics of nonprofits, y'all. So there you go, Jenna.
Thank you for that. Okay, we are sifting through here. This one's from Catalina. Since community engagement is very important for sustainability, what strategies can we use for that?
Well, volunteerism is the number one community engagement strategy. Number one, I think, above and beyond anything else. Whether it's ongoing volunteers, event volunteers, volunteer advisory committees, obviously your board of directors, skills-based volunteers. There are tons of different ways to engage the community in your mission, and volunteerism is the number one way. The other way to engage the community is to get the community engaged in helping you map your future community. When people work from a community-based grassroots to grass tops model, then, and I've done community organizing myself, you actually create your goals and objectives for your nonprofit based on what the community tells you. So that's another way to engage the community. Those are two big ways: volunteerism and engaging the community in driving your objectives, your main goals, and your activities of your nonprofit.
Thank you for that. Toby, how are we on time for you?
I can stay a little later. It's up to you, Jenna.
Okay, you know what? Let's give it one or two more questions, and then we will direct all of you to our Donorbox Knowledge community, where you can drop all of your questions for us, and we'll be sure to take our time to answer them. And okay, I like this question. I think that this is a really great one from Brittany. How do you recommend engaging volunteers that would need to open their homes for extended periods of time rather than attending a specific quick volunteer event? So what's that volunteer persona?
Yeah, so the volunteer persona, you've got to think about right now, who already does that for you if you've had that volunteer opportunity. So it sounds like, there are people who do this. There are people who, for example, will host students from overseas. There are people who are foster parents. There are people who are foster parents to furry friends, right? So there are people who are opening their houses to, there are people who help out with refugees, for example. So this is not unheard of. So you've got to create a volunteer. And again, I hate to keep talking about the volunteer management fundamentals course, but we talk about how to design the volunteer role, right? How to design it in a way that makes sense, in a way that people can understand what their responsibilities are. You want to make sure that you have a really clear understanding of what a position description is, what we call it, to what is entailed for that. And you want to think about who are low-hanging fruit and develop a persona around either people who are really already really successful in that volunteer role, or who could be successful in that volunteer role and might be interested. Now, I always think of people who have extra time on their hands, like retirees, foster, grandparents who don't get to live near their grandbabies. Then they might be interested in hosting, for example, a student from overseas, or people who are foreign language buffs. They might be interested, I speak Spanish. I might be interested. I actually do speak Spanish. I might be interested in hosting a student from Central America, for example, or a family from Central America. So it's not unheard of to have this level and depth of commitment as a volunteer, but you've got to structure the opportunity really well and make sure it does have a beginning, middle, and an end. It needs to have an end date. It can't be ongoing forever. That's a big barrier for people to sign up to volunteer. They'll say, hey, I don't want to sign my life away. I've asked volunteers. They tell me that. I go, why don't you join? Because I don't want to sign my life away. So it's got to have a beginning, middle, and end. But it's got to be very, very structured, because you're asking a lot of people, but it's not unheard of for people to give to this level. So
thank you so much for that. I think that was a strong question to end on. Again, if we did not get to your question today, do not fret. You can join the Donorbox Knowledge Community. Drop your questions in there for us to answer. We will also be providing the recording to this webinar and the link to the slide deck and workbook. We have got you covered, and we'll also provide the link to the course that Toby has. And again, we make sure that you are supported in every step of the way through your volunteer engagement. Here at Donorbox, we have an amazing nonprofit blog. You can type in volunteer and find so many articles volunteer related. And again, we have this donor management system that can help you keep up with that relationship, because volunteers are donors. Remember that. Thank you for that insight, Toby. Toby, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. This was an amazing presentation. Very eye-opening, very actionable. And everyone who has logged on today, thank you all for all that you do in your community. And we are so proud to provide the tools and resources you need to help you help others. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks,
Take
Toby.
care.